This is Brent Allan Winters, commonlawyer.com, www.commonlawyer.com, and at that website, commonlawyer.com, you can find In Church, INNCHURCH. And when I'm by myself, I call it the Common Lawyer Comments, but Montana Dan is the other elder at In Church, and he'll tell you there when we meet. You can join us on the internet. You can see me, but I can't see you. Thank you. And we have neglected, Montana Dan. This is the point I want to make here briefly, if I may. We have neglected in America in the last number of decades the laws of nature. The Bible tells us that God has revealed himself in 2 volumes, the laws of nature. That's the way God created creation, and he did it according to very specific laws and realities and facts. And a significant slice of that we call our common law tradition. And then there's the laws of nature's God. That's the Bible. And those 2 phrases we find in our Declaration of 76. They arose out of the Scottish Reformation, followed by the Scottish Enlightenment, which recognized that. Any apparent inconsistencies between those 2 volumes, the first unwritten, the laws of nature, and the second written, any apparent inconsistencies are to be resolved in the court of last resort, which is the laws of nature's God, the Bible. Right now, right here, we're talking about the laws of nature. Without the laws of nature, Montana Dan, there's nothing to apply the Bible to. And when I say we've neglected that, that has damaged us. Just the Bible, theologians, Bible teachers, but wait a minute. God has made this entire world. Go read. I tell people, read Psalm 19, and you can see the importance of the laws of nature. Read Romans chapter 1. Paul the Apostle tells us that's where it all starts. You can't be committed to understanding the Bible without acknowledging first the laws of nature. And if you don't, the Bible's meaningless to you. Well, there's more to be said, but what I want to ask Montana Dan now is a very specific question. We did a presentation about cattle and the importance of cattle in America and the culture of cattle. The culture of cattle. What is culture? That's what you think is worthwhile to cultivate. We cultivated corn at home before they had herbicide, but in America we've also cultivated cattle. And we eat more beef here than any country in the world. We still do and always have ever since the beginning of our country. The cattle industry, when it went west, their grazing lands were so vast, and we had the markets and we had our common law tradition that enabled us through competition to get the beef to the markets before refrigeration by rail to Chicago stockyards before there were any stockyards out west. The cattle industry in Montana thrived because the railroad, the Great Northern, Dan, maybe you can expand on this. I just know what I read about it. The Great Northern went to Montana. And that went straight back to the stockyards in Chicago, and that was the economic hub of not only America, but the world. And then they made ice. They figured out how to do that, and putting that ice in those refrigeration cars at the stockyards, they shipped beef to the eastern cities and overseas. That happened before modern technology invented the Freon refrigerator. Oh boy, there was money to be made, and men figured it out how to make it happen. They did. Well, Montana Dan, where do the cattle go up there in Montana? Go ahead, you're going to say something. I don't want to.
Yeah, it was kind of before my time, but every little town or every so often there was a little stockyard or a place to load cattle on the train all through Montana. The train was a pretty vital part of survival out here.
Without the railroad,
a lot of people came on it.
A lot of people came there, right? And without the railroad, there was no way to get cattle to market. With no way to get cattle to market back east, the cattle business and ranching would have ended. But it hasn't, and we're still, I assume, shipping cattle that way. I don't know how they do it in Montana now. I see the cattle. I want to tell a little story about you, Dan, if I may, and then you can comment on it. Is that all right? Yes.
Yeah. One comment before you do. Now it's they usually send them on trucks, semis.
All right.
They seem to be quicker than a train. I think the train could compete, but they don't seem to be interested. They're more interested in hauling grain and stuff that's not so perishable. Or they haul the finished product in refrigerated cars.
Well, that's a good point, too. I know the trains out there in your neck of the woods, Wyoming, Montana, haul a lot of coal these days. That's still the most economic way to get coal back east. And the coal mines out there are thriving, by the way, especially since Trump is in office. Yeah, man, I went to coal country down in Wyoming not long. Well, stayed in that town down there around Gillette and down in there. And I went into Walmart, and the election was going on, and the gal that met me when I went into Walmart, I just didn't have to stay in town, so I just said, "Who are you voting for president?" She said, "You got to be kidding me, don't you?" I said, No, I just want to know. Oh, she was on the edge of getting mad, like I was going to say something she didn't agree with. And finally, she got her relaxed a little bit. She was ready to strangle somebody if they needed it. It's what it boiled down to. She thought maybe I was a good candidate, but I told, "Oh, no, I'm for Trump. Relax." She said, "Listen, in this town, it's a coal mining town. If you ain't for Trump, you ain't going to last." That's what she said. And the same thing is true in West Virginia, of course, Kentucky, southern Indiana, southern Illinois, all that coal country back east, but I didn't know how that was about out there, and a lot of oil production. They're hauling that on the train cars, I suppose. But cattle have been different. They started that way. And now, if it's economic, whatever is the best way to make money doing it, that's the way it's going to happen in America, because that's what drives us here. God help us. You got to be able to make money according to our common law tradition, the law of the land. That's what it's all about. That's why the laws of nature are so important. There are limits. God has set them. We don't want to abuse each other, but competition is a big deal. So here's the story I want to tell that I learned going to church with you, Dan. I went to church with you a couple of times, and I was talking to your preacher, and he grew up on a cattle ranch out there, and his father managed a ranch. And he's a good Bible teacher. I enjoyed going. And I talked to him a little bit. I'd met him, and I asked him about how he grew up and about cattle, because that's big in Montana. That's like gold is in Nevada. Well, he said, "See that little lady, that elderly lady sitting over there in the corner pew that's talking to somebody?" It was after church. It was a small church. And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "That gal's family were the first family to bring Angus into Montana." I said, "No kidding." I said, "I've been through Montana. I don't see hundreds of Angus. I see thousands upon thousands when I drive around Montana. There are Angus everywhere. Those are the black ones, right?" Well, do you know anything about that story and that lady's family and how that happened?
Yeah, I've heard the story. When I was a kid, it was mostly Herefords, and then they started bringing some black bulls, black cows in, and back then they were really small, so they had to start competing. So they crossed them with her. The story has it they crossed them with Holsteins so they could get a little size to them and milk.
Oh. And that happened in Montana?
Yes, the Angus were promoted real heavily with one of the big livestock sales folks here it's in Billings.
Well, when I go to the grocery store now, Dan, all I see is the word Angus at the meat department. It's Angus beef, Angus beef, Angus. I don't see anything about Hereford no more. And if you ain't selling Angus, it probably won't sell. And I think you're the one that told me that's the result of a very sophisticated and hard-driven promotion for the Angus Association, because Hereford beef tastes pretty good too.
Yeah, I don't know if there's much difference. And the higher altitude, people have cows in the higher altitude, the Angus can't survive up there.
All beef. So you got to get them down in the valleys.
Yep. Lower elevation.
So, okay, Montana, Dan, getting to Montana, and we'd made the point in the last YouTube video that the way you raise cattle in the Wabash Valley, where I'm from, is different than the way you raise it in the deserts of Arizona, and that's different than the way you raised it in the mountains of Montana. But I'd always heard that in the wintertime, the ranchers bring their cattle down out of the mountains, down to the lower, warmer regions, so they have a better chance of survival. Then in the summertime, they'll bring them up to the higher elevations where they can graze through the winter. Is that true?
Yeah, the snow gets too deep up in the mountains. Yeah, you got to get them out. There's one ranch up south here. They haul their cows out of the mountains. They have good summer pasture up with the grizzly bears, but they haul the cows out in the wintertime because it's just it's not very hospitable.
How do they keep the grizzly bears from eating the cows?
They don't seem to have too much trouble. That's a whole different topic with those bears, but they're getting to be way too many of them, and they don't count them in certain areas, and they always have to have a quota. That's a different topic.
But the grizzly bears are getting out of hand, you're saying? That's an important topic.
Yes.
Albeit.
Well, they harm people, kill people frequently. They eat a lot of cows, calves. And another big problem was the wolves here in Montana several years back too. The wolves that they brought here were never here in this part of the country. They're great big Canadian coastal wolves that they brought here. Huge, big animals.
You know, Dan, as far back as I can remember in our country, if carnivorous animals were eating livestock, it was open season on them until it stopped, until it was under control. Including mountain lions in California, it was open season on them until 1970 with the Endangered Species Act that Nixon signed under political pressure, of course. But now I give you my observation, and then you tell me what you think. It's been my observation that once a dangerous critter like that becomes protected, that if you give them enough time, they will start eating livestock, and then they will start eating people again. Is that your experience? You're from out west. Is that your experience in Montana?
Yeah, the big bears, they have no fear of people. When I was a little kid, they used to hunt them, and they would hightail it when they saw people around. Now they don't care. We had some friends from back east, Pennsylvania, here this last fall, and there's an area up south where, it's that same ranch where they haul the cows out in the wintertime. Uh-huh. We went up there 2 different mornings in a row and saw 12 grizzly bears from one spot.
Good grief. Yeah. Of course, they're a magnificent and beautiful animal. I understand that. But they're magnificently...
That's your story.
Well, but they're magnificently dangerous, isn't that? Well, I'm trying to be balanced in my point of view. I don't want people to think that I just want to kill animals to kill animals. But God says in the Bible, and this is the balance of it, that he will little by little drive the dangerous beasts from the land he gives you, and then they will stop eating you. And in California now, mountain lions are eating people. They're down in the towns killing people's chickens, their dogs, their cats. And I don't know that that's good. Well, I didn't know the story on grizzly bears in Montana. You and I had never talked about that, and I'm better well instructed now that you've mentioned it. But there are those factions out there, Montana Dan, that are fully convinced that animals are more important than are men.
What do you think causes that? I already know the answer, but I want you to explain it for us.
Oh, well, I would get back to Romans 1, which I'd mentioned a while ago, that if a person, it says in Romans 1, this is the beginning, the start of his unpacking of the great gospel of God. That's the book of Romans. And he says that all the trouble starts when a man or a woman rejects a fact. And that fact is that God has created all things. He is creator. And everything else is creation. It's creaturely, including us. Grizzly bears, mountain cats. And the Bible says that if you reject that distinction between creator and creation, you will inevitably reject the creator and you will worship four-footed creatures and beasts, all sorts of them. Of course, the question comes, what does worship mean? Well, that's an old English, old Anglo-Saxon Danish word that means worthy-ship. You attribute worth to some other thing. If you're not going to attribute the proper worth to the creator of all things, the proper esteem, the proper respect, the proper trust to the creator of all things, you will inevitably, unavoidably, turn your trust and your worship, your attributing of worth to some created thing, and at the forefront of those created things will be wild beasts, and you will worship them, and they will become more worthy, more important, of more worth than God's creature, man. And the Bible says God creature man. Adam's race is the crowning of his creation, and all of these beasts, says the Bible. There's the laws of nature as God and the importance of applying the Bible to the laws of nature. The wild beasts are to us man as God, the creator, is to man. As God, the creator, is to me, the wild beast. Did I get that right? As God, the creator, is to me, as I look at him, the wild beasts look at me. The Bible says God has put the fear of me, mankind, upon them. That's why they do what they do. You know, Dan, would you agree? You've been around animals. You grew up around animals. You grew up on the farm. You grew up on the ranch, as they say out there. Are animals afraid of men? You mentioned this while ago.
I think that's the way God intended it, and we're to be stewards of what we have. I'm not anti-wildlife by any means. I enjoy seeing them, but when it gets out of balance, like it is with the grizzly bears and the wolves and the buffalo, people put them in the place of God, and then we're turned over to depraved mind and you know, all the predatory animals. If there's not some control measures or whatever, they lose the fear of man, and they're.
All right, Montana Dan, let me ask you this. Do you, in your experience with animals, we're talking horses, you're from Montana, horses, cattle, and maybe some other critters. Has it been your experience observing the laws of nature that animals can sense a lot of times when you're afraid of them?
Oh, yeah.
Can you give me what, dogs, for example, cattle, horses, are they all that way?
I think to a certain extent, people that break horses, that do it well, that they get control of the animal. The horse is many times larger than we are. But God gives examples like that, a bridle in a horse's mouth and a rudder on a ship. God gave us the job of being the stewards. We're supposed to control the earth and populate and subdue. So,
okay,
but yes.
Let me press you a little bit. Every day, twice a day, you've handled cattle. That's what you did, and you had to do it every day, twice a day. You told me that before. Can a cow sense your confidence, or in the extreme other side, your fear when you're trying to handle her, get her to calm down? Can she sense that you're not confident, you don't know what you're doing, and can that be dangerous when that happens?
I suppose it could be dangerous, but absolutely they can. Somebody with a calm demeanor both with cows and horses and other livestock, it makes a huge difference.
You mentioned a while ago that the grizzlies are proliferating, and also they don't act like they're afraid of men anymore. It used to be when you were a kid, you said you see a grizzly, it would skedaddle, and not now.
Correct.
Could that be because the fear is the other way around, and they sense and they've experienced that men are afraid of them?
I think in part, yes. Probably is. There's way too many of them, and the system we have is not managing wisely because there's no fear of God.
Well, yeah, I've noticed that when I've noticed that a dog can sense my fear, and when he senses I'm a little bit fearful, it encourages him to be more aggressive if he's an aggressive animal. Horses, I've noticed since that if I lack confidence in what I'm doing, they take advantage of that. They'll run under a limb, try to knock you off. They'll bloat up when you're trying to tighten the cinch.
It sounds like you had a Shetland pony when you were young.
Well, we got them go to the auction barn. My granddad go down there. He had fun. He thought it was fun to buy weird stuff, I guess. But we had Mustang horses from out west. They'd bring them in because at that time, back then, you could gather them up. Nobody cared. And now, of course, then the government has said you can't do that, and so they're too thick, they're disease-ridden, they're full of lice, they're dying. That's the kind of stupidity when government gets involved. But we could get those kind of animals, and some fellows out west would breed them, the Mustangs with larger horses. They get all these crossbreeds, but Mustangs, by the way, are a small horse, and we had those kind of horses. We call them half horses almost. We don't, people call Mustangs Mustang ponies. I've heard that all, and the reason is because they're small. Yeah, we had those kind of critters. That's right, Dan. Well, at any rate, when they sensed that I wasn't confident, and my father, when I was little, he tried to teach me how to lead them, and what he did show me was that if you don't act like you know what you're doing, they'll just run over you, walk over you. They won't have to, and the fear of the animal is supposed to be on them. God says he puts it on them. And if we treat them with more respect than we do men, we're going to suffer the consequences. I have seen that with dogs, as I'd said, and I just read a thing the other day that dogs are not living. This was, I think, on the internet someplace. Dogs are not living as long as they did 50 years ago when we fed them scraps. We're feeding them dog food now. We're spending a lot of money on them, and they're dying of cancer early. We're spending more money on the dogs than we are on children. And when I travel, I see people are traveling with dogs a lot. You go to a rest stop, and they've got a place fenced off with a fake fire hydrant in the middle of it. You can take your dog in there so he can urinate on the fire hydrant. Isn't that nuts? I mean, that's taxpayer money. Why have you got that dog in your car to start with? Well, we didn't used to do that because everybody knows that dogs, we love them. They're man's best friend, but you don't kiss them and you don't let them eat off your plate because you might get an ugly disease. And the Bible makes that point too about dogs. Well, thank you, Montana Dan. That's Montana Dan on cattle, horses, and other critters. The laws of nature, the laws of nature, and the laws of nature's God, the Bible, the laws of nature, the laws that govern the creation that God has made. Significant nice to that is our common law tradition.
One more point before we break this off. When you properly graze animals, kind of before my time, and well, even when I was young, there was a lot of sheep in this area, but they'd keep them moving around. But I was talking about intensive grazing, and if you keep moving them, you help the health of the soil. But I also went to here in Montana. We have the Montana State University, and in Missoula at the University of Montana, there's the MSU Montana State Forestry Extension over there, and they're doing program training landowners, it's a good idea to use cattle to control the grass. And it is a fact when you do graze and then move on, the wildlife will come into those areas. And a lot of people here, they buy large tracts of land and they don't want any cows on it, so they can have wildlife on their land. And the wildlife will go there when there's hunting pressure, but they prefer the younger, nicer, tender grass after it's been properly grazed. So I just had to throw that.
Oh, I'm glad you did, and that opens up another vast and important area that I want to discuss with you. This is Brent Allan Winters, commonlawyer.com, www.commonlawyer.com. This is Brent Allan Winters and Dan, Montana Dan, I call him. We are the two elders at In Church, INN. Go to commonlawyer.com and you can see how to join us for church on Sundays, and also a lot of the resources there, even a law school. You can get certificates in the common law subjects, everything from contracts to constitutional law, law of torts, the law of common law of evidence. That's the laws of nature, and the laws of nature is God, the Bible. The two are mutually supportive. commonlawyer.com.